Hello, and thanks for stopping by. If you're familiar with British landmarks, I'm sure you've already noticed that I'm currently standing outside the Royal Liver Building, one of the most iconic sites in the city of Liverpool. Opened in 1911, the Liver Building is topped by two statues of the mythical liver birds, one gazing out towards the sea and the other inland, which according to tradition enables the pair to keep a protective eye over both sailors and their families back home. Although some locals joke that the bird pointing towards the city is in fact checking to see whether or not the pubs are open. I love Liverpool. It's easily one of my favourite cities, a place packed with bold architecture and a rich, profound industrial history. Plus, of course, it's blessed the world with some of the best pop music ever known. Above all though, it's the Liverpudlians themselves, the Scousers, who truly make this city. They're a great bunch of people, and Liverpool is, by far, one of the friendliest places in Britain. And if you're wondering where the term Scouser originates from, by the way, well, stay tuned as I'll be explaining that a little later. Anyway, in this video, I'd like to take you on a trip around this great city and show you some of its hidden corners and lesser known sites, places related to transport, war, architecture, and much more, which can be easily missed if you're a visitor. And yes, naturally, we will be seeing something of the Beatles. A good place to begin our journey is at St John's Beacon, also known as Radio City Tower, a 453 feet or 138 metres tall structure on Houghton Street, which offers a public viewing gallery, perfect for an excellent bird's eye view of the city. St John's Beacon opened in 1969, and like the old post office tower, now the BT Tower in London, it once boasted a revolving restaurant. Although sadly this closed in the early 1980s, its final incarnation being a Buck Rogers themed burger joint. Back down on the ground, let's head now to James Street, which is just across from Liverpool's waterfront. This distinctive red and white striped building, which stands at 30 James Street, is known as Albion House. It was designed in the 1890s by Richard Norman Shaw, the same architect responsible for the second incarnation of the Great Scotland Yard Police Headquarters in London. As you can see, the two buildings are remarkably similar. Today, Albion House serves as a hotel, although it was initially commissioned as the headquarters for the White Star Line, the shipping company who, famously, owned the RMS Titanic. It was for this reason that the Titanic, which sank in April 1912, was registered in Liverpool, hence the city's name being emblazoned upon the ill-fated ship's stern. And, in the immediate aftermath of the disaster, it was from Albion House that a list of all of those known to have perished was read out, this being done so from one of these balconies, as officials feared they'd be mobbed if they set foot outside. Today, models of various ships, including the Titanic, are displayed in several windows at Albion House. Nearby, opposite the Liver Building, there's another Titanic link, and a very profound one at that. It's called the Memorial to the Heroes of the Marine Engine Room. This monument was put in place to honour the 244 engineers, namely men who worked in the ship's sweltering engine room, who died in a disaster, many of who had close ties with Liverpool. The memorial is made from granite and bears shrapnel damage from the Liverpool Blitz, more of which later. Further Titanic-related artefacts can be viewed in the Merseyside Maritime Museum, which is free to enter and located at the Royal Albert Dock. Items here include this life jacket worn by a survivor, a nameplate from a lifeboat, and White Star branded crockery, which was salvaged from the wreck. There's also this impressive model of the Titanic, which was put together by the shipbuilders Harland and Wolff in Belfast, at the same time the full-scale ship was being constructed in the early 1910s. Another famous ship, which like the Titanic was registered in Liverpool and also suffered a tragic end, was the RMS Lusitania, which was owned by the Cunard Line, who also maintained a large office in the city. The Lusitania was torpedoed off of the coast of Ireland on the 7th of May 1915, 8 months into World War I, whilst en route from New York to Liverpool. 1,195 lives were lost in the atrocity. In 1982, one of the Lusitania's 4 propellers was recovered from the seabed, and it's now displayed on Liverpool's waterfront. As with the Titanic, items from the Lusitania can also be viewed inside the Maritime Museum, including this lifebuoy, deck chair and cushion. As the docks and connections with famous shipping companies demonstrate, Liverpool has a long maritime history. One aspect of this, starting in the 1830s, was the establishment of a direct trading route with Shanghai, which in turn led many Chinese sailors to settle in Liverpool. As such, Liverpool is home to Europe's oldest Chinatown, an area which is marked by this huge ceremonial arch on Nelson Street, the largest of its kind outside of China. It was also the presence of sailors, European ones in this case, which led to the creation of the term Scouser to describe Liverpudlians. You see, Scouse derives from lobscouse, a stew made with beef or lamb, and various vegetables, most notably red cabbage, which originated around Norway and Denmark. Sailors from those countries brought the recipe with them, and the dish quickly became popular in Liverpool. Scouse stew is very tasty, and there are plenty of pubs and restaurants around the city which serve it. If you're vegetarian, there's a meatless version too. It's called blind scouse. Another interesting link with maritime history can be found in a rather unlikely place: Anfield Stadium, home to Liverpool FC. Here, close to the Kop, you can see this tall flagpole, which in fact used to be a ship's mast, the ship it belonged to being Isambard Kingdom Brunel's gigantic SS Great Eastern. After being launched from the Isle of Dogs in London in 1858, the SS Great Eastern led a troubled and relatively short life, although it was notable for laying the first transatlantic telegraph cable between Britain and America. Once its time was up, the huge ship was towed to the River Mersey for breaking up, although before this commenced, it spent time as a mobile advertising display for Liverpool's Lewis's department store. Fortunately, this mast was saved. Liverpool's other football team is of course Everton, who play close by at Goodison Park, although they'll soon be moving to a new ground at Bramley Moor Dock. It was in fact Everton who first acquired the SS Great Eastern's flagpole in 1891, the club having been the first to use Anfield before disagreements led to the founding of Liverpool FC in 1892. If you look at Everton's crest, you'll notice it features the image of a small tower topped with a cone-shaped roof. This building is the Everton Lockup, also known as Prince Rupert's Tower, which you can see on Everton Brow. This distinctive little building, which dates from 1787, was built as a small jail, where drunks and petty criminals could be held overnight before being taken to a magistrate in the morning. As well as its long-held connections with seafaring, Liverpool has also played a major role in the history of railway transport, it having been the western terminus of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, which, having begun operating in September 1830, was the world's first true intercity line. You can see this beautiful old locomotive, the Lion, which dates from 1838 and was built for service on the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, in the Museum of Liverpool, which, like the Maritime Museum, is free to enter. In later life, the line was used in the 1953 Ealing comedy, The Titsfield Thunderbolt. Liverpool's very first terminal on the pioneering Liverpool and Manchester Railway was Crown Street, which was used for just 6 years before the line was extended to the current station at Lime Street. Today, the site of the old Crown Street terminal is covered by a park, at the northern end of which sits this large brick tower. This structure is in fact an old ventilation shaft, and it was constructed for the Wapping Tunnel, a branch of the railway which was created to carry freight down to Wapping Dock, an incredible piece of engineering for the time. The extension of the passenger line to Lime Street required a major cutting to be forged from Edge Hill, which trains to and from Lime Street still pass through to this day. This was a major project, and much of the work was overseen by a contractor named William Mackenzie. William died in 1851, and his tomb can be found in the churchyard of St Andrews on Rodney Street. As you can see, being shaped like a pyramid, it looks rather unconventional. William Mackenzie was a keen gambler, and according to Liverpool legend, he requested that his final resting place be designed in this manner so that when the time came, he could be entombed in it whilst sitting upright at a card table, complete with a winning set of cards tucked into his dead hand. This is all nonsense, of course. In reality, he's buried beneath the pyramid in the traditional manner. Returning to the railways, we can see several other examples of disused railway architecture dotted around Liverpool. There's this large, old tunnel portal, for example, located between Sefton Street and Riverside Drive, which once formed part of the Liverpool Overhead Railway. When opened in 1893, this overhead line was the world's first elevated electric railway. It ran alongside Liverpool's docks, and came to be nicknamed the Docker's Umbrella, because if you were on foot, the overhead tracks provided handy shelter from the rain. Sadly, the system was closed down and dismantled in the late 1950s, although you can see a preserved car from the overhead railway, along with other related artefacts, in the Museum of Liverpool. Not too far from the old tunnel entrance is the Brunswick Ramp. Dating from 1866, this once formed part of a bridge which crossed over the original Brunswick station, its main purpose being to provide a route for the many horses which once pulled carts through this area. Because of this, a horse trough was incorporated, and there are even 2 little dog bowls as well. Nowadays, since most of the bridge has long since vanished, the Brunswick Ramp is essentially a road to nowhere. Something which tends to get overlooked when it comes to Liverpool is that, technically, the city has its own underground railway, as a number of deep subterranean stations serve both Liverpool city centre and parts of Birkenhead. These underground stations are Moorfields, Lime Street, Liverpool Central, James Street, Hamilton Square, and Conway Park, all of which come under the wider Merseyrail network. Out of these, James Street and Hamilton Square are of particular historical interest, as together they represent the world's oldest deep-level subway stations. Although the world's first underground line, the Metropolitan Railway, had begun operating in London in 1863, that line is relatively shallow, having been built just below street level with the so-called cut-and-cover method, largely due to the fact that it was initially designed with steam locomotives in mind. James Street and Hamilton Square, meanwhile, are far deeper, serving opposite ends of a rail tunnel beneath the River Mersey, which lies at a depth of between 77 to 113 feet, or 23 to 34 metres. This line was forged by the Mersey Railway and opened for service in February 1886, 4 years before deep level stations first appeared in London with the City and South London Railway. Like the early Metropolitan Railway, the Mersey Railway also relied upon steam locomotives at first, and although a system of mechanical ventilation was incorporated, it didn't prove to be very effective, meaning the tunnel was often choked with smoke. So much so that many passengers would choose to take the ferry instead. This problem was fixed at around the turn of the 20th century, when the line was electrified. James Street in particular is well worth a look, as one of the platforms there is fitted out with vintage signage and posters. The station also has a discreet entrance tucked into the India buildings on Water Street, which isn't for the faint-hearted, as it involves a very steep climb. Another notable tunnel in Liverpool is the Queensway Tunnel, which was built between 1925 and 1934 to carry motor traffic between Liverpool and the Wirral Peninsula. The Queensway Tunnel is 2 miles long, and for 14 years it held the record for being the world's longest road tunnel. You can see an original, decommissioned Art Deco toll booth, once used for taking payments at the tunnel entrance, perched beside the large ventilation shaft at George's Dock. And just around the corner, there's a memorial dedicated to the 17 men who died during the tunnel's construction. At first glance, you may be inclined to assume that this building, the stylish Oriel Chambers on Water Street, dates from the early 20th century. However, it's significantly older than that, having been built all the way back in 1864. At the time, the Oriel was ultra-modern, and was the first structure to use a metal-framed glass curtain wall, an innovation which would later play a key role in the development of American skyscrapers. It would seem the Oriel wasn't too popular when it was first unveiled back in the 1860s though. One review at the time claimed the building would be depressing were it not ludicrous. Just a few doors up from the Oriel stands the former St Martin's Bank. It was to here, shortly after the outbreak of World War II, and with the threat of invasion looming, that the Bank of England sent most of Britain's gold reserve. The bars were lowered through this hatch for safekeeping, the ultimate goal being to get them shipped to Canada. Another example of precautions taken in the face of a potential Nazi invasion can be found on Stallbridge Avenue in Mossley Hill. These concrete blocks, nicknamed Dragon's Teeth, were placed here in 1940 as a means of preventing enemy vehicles from taking a railway embankment, which of course would have been a key strategic point. It's likely the traps were placed here by the Home Guard, aka the affectionately nicknamed Dad's Army. During the Second World War, Liverpool played a vital role in keeping the nation supplied, for it was the main port of arrival for ships serving on the North Atlantic convoys. Those ships that made it, that is, for during the Battle of the Atlantic, some 3,500 merchant vessels were sunk. The Maritime Museum has some interesting items related to the convoys. This lamp would have been used to signal across to other crews. Whilst this object is known as a Mackworth fog buoy, it would have been towed from a ship's stern in thick fog to prevent collisions from other vessels sailing close behind. The nerve centre, which oversaw those brave convoys, was right here in Liverpool, at the Western Approaches Command Bunker. Today, this fascinating site is open to the public as a museum, and it's well worth a visit. The entrance is on Rumford Street, and inside you'll discover a time capsule, for most of the bunker remains just as it appeared when wound down in 1945. As you can see from this vast map, it was from here that convoys were monitored and enemy U-boats tracked. The pins moved around on this board would have dictated the fates of many, including the appalling losses suffered by both sides in the conflict. Much of the Western Approach's bunker lies beneath the grand square known as Exchange Flags, and here, hiding in plain sight, there's a ventilation shaft for the complex. It's tucked beneath this monument to Lord Nelson, which dates from 1813, and was shifted upwards in the late 1930s to accommodate the bunker. By the way, if you examine the Nelson monument closely, you'll see it contains a rather chilling figure. This skeleton, placing a bony hand upon the naval hero as a means of signifying death. Due to its importance in the Second World War, Merseyside was heavily bombed, resulting in the deaths of several thousand civilians. A stark reminder of this period is the shell of St Luke's Church, on the corner of Berry Street and Lee Street. Dating from 1832, St Luke's was gutted in an air raid which occurred just after midnight on the 6th of May 1941. Today the church serves as a memorial and arts venue, and in the surrounding garden you can see this emotive artwork, which commemorates the Christmas truce and football match which began on Christmas Eve 1914, just a few months into World War I. A few years before the Second World War erupted, Britain bore witness to the abdication crisis, in which King Edward VIII gave up the throne in order to pursue a life with Wallis Simpson, which in hindsight was likely a good thing considering his political leanings. Due to this, Edward VIII served as monarch for less than a year, which makes this postbox, erected on the corner of Canning Street during his brief reign in 1936, very rare indeed. Since the 1960s, it's been impossible to mention Liverpool without evoking the Beatles. The origins of the Fab Four can be traced to St Peter's Church in Walton, for it was here, at a summer fete held on the 6th of July 1957, that 16-year-old John Lennon first befriended 15-year-old Paul McCartney. It's also in the churchyard of St Peter's that you'll find a gravestone dedicated to the Rigby family, one of the names on it being listed as one Eleanor Rigby, who died in 1939, aged just 44. Eleanor Rigby is of course the name of one of the Beatles' best known songs, and although Paul McCartney maintains that he made the name up when working on it in 1966, he has conceded that there may have been some subconscious influence, given how familiar he and John were with St Peter's. Back in central Liverpool, on Stanley Street, there sits a melancholy statue of an imagined Eleanor Rigby, which the early rock and roll star, Tommy Still, sculpted as a gift for the city in 1982. The modest homes in which each of the Beatles spent their formative years can still be seen around Liverpool. Paul McCartney lived at 20 Fourth Lynn Road in Allerton. The family moved here in 1955. George Harrison was born here, at 12 Arnold Grove, Wavertree, in 1943. The family moved to Upton Green in 1950, and a plaque was unveiled at George's Arnold Grove home in May 2024. Ringo Starr lived at 10 Admiral Grove in Toxteth, and remained here until the Beatles' career went stratospheric in 1963. At the end of Ringo's old road, on the corner with High Park Street, you can see this huge Beatles mural, complete with the Yellow Submarine, the dreadful Flying Glove, and the menacing Chief Blue Meanie. John Lennon, meanwhile, lived at 251 Menlove Avenue in Walton, also remaining here until 1963. It was here that Please Please Me was written. John's former home was purchased by his widow, Yoko Ono, in 2002, and she then donated it to the National Trust. Sadly, it is also on Menlove Avenue, on the 15th of July 1958, that John's mother, Julia, was killed after being struck by a car, and it's now become tradition every year on the anniversary of John Lennon's murder, which occurred in New York on the 8th of December 1980, to leave his old bedroom light on throughout the night. If we return to Paul McCartney's former home, there's a point of interest to be found very close to here. This is a so-called Robin Hood stone, an ancient monolith which is believed to date from the Neolithic or Bronze Age. Until the 1920s, this area was all fields, and the stone was located just under 200 feet from its present location, It was shifted here in 1928 as the surrounding homes were being built. An unusual feature of the stone are these long grooves, which run along either side of it. It's been speculated these were used for sharpening axes or arrowheads, hence the Robin Hood name. And more gruesomely, it's been claimed that the grooves were used by druids for channeling blood. In reality though, the marks are most likely a curious natural quirk. Another ancient landmark in Liverpool is the mighty Allerton Oak, which stands in what's now called the Stones Park. The Allerton Oak is said to be around 1,000 years old, although more recent estimates put its age at between 500 and 550 years. Two alternative names for it are the Law Oak and the Court Oak, as it's believed the space around the tree was once used as a venue for the manor courts, a body which often met outdoors to dispense local justice. In World War I, it became common for soldiers heading off to the front line to take leaves and acorns from the Allerton Oak, both as a good luck charm and a reminder of home, and this was a tradition which was repeated in World War II. A good place to finish our exploration of Liverpool is at Sefton Park, a large and very beautiful Victorian green space, which is sited just south of the city centre. Here you can see the Palm House, which dates from the 1890s, along with this bandstand, which is believed to have provided the Beatles with inspiration for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Sefton Park is also home to a replica of the Shaftesbury Memorial Fountain, the twin of which you'll find in the middle of London's Piccadilly Circus. And as Liverpool's version sits in a quiet, leafy park, this one is a lot easier to appreciate. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of Liverpool and would love to hear your own thoughts on this great city. Are you a Liverpudlian yourself? If so, what other historic sites or places of interest would you recommend visiting? And perhaps most importantly, which pub or restaurant do you think offers the best Scouse stew? Please be sure to let me know in the comments. If you haven't yet subscribed to Rob's London, then I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, will ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish a new video. Plus of course, it'd be wonderful to have you along. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support my work with a tip via either my Ko-fi account, which I'll link below, or the YouTube thanks button, which appears as a heart icon beneath the video. Any such financial donations are of course greatly appreciated, and they really do help go towards creating content. Anyway, on that note, thanks again for watching friends. Stay well, and please be sure to stay tuned.